We're working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Welcome back to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Kaloy Bunda from the New Era University ASEAN Studies Center. For today's episode, we will be discussing about one of the remarkable moments in APEC and how it will affect the global economy, which is the trade tension between the US and China, specifically their influence in the Pacific region. To help us with that, we're honored to have as guest a career minister, actually the Director General of the APEC Secretariat in the Philippines. He's assigned at the Office of the Undersecretary for International Relations, Mr. Eric Gerard Tamayo. Good afternoon, Eric. Okay. Prior to his current assignment, Eric served as Minister and Consul General of the Embassy in Ottawa, Canada, and as alternative representative to the United Nations International Civil Aviation Organization, as well as the alternate focal point person to the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. He also served as Charge d'Affaires and Intern at the Embassy. He was previously assigned at the Philippine Embassy in Tokyo, Japan, assigned as Principal Assistant at the Office of the Secretary, and eventually designated Head of the Economic Diplomacy Unit, concurrent as Special Assistant to the Secretary of Foreign Affairs. Okay, Mr. Tamayo, Eric, we will talk about one of the, actually it was a first, I think, in the history of APEC, a leaders meeting in APEC, when the leaders were not able to issue a joint statement. This happened in 2018, held at where's the venue there? Papua New Guinea. Yeah. Okay. What's the significance of this event?
Well, thank you very much, Kaloy, and good afternoon to your listeners. Thank you for having me here in your show this afternoon. First off, thank you for clarifying that indeed there are trade tensions simmering in other parts of the world, and that was evident in the outcome of the APEC meetings this year, and I'll get to that, and we'll get back to that shortly. And as you said, this is the first time that since APEC started a tradition of having the leaders of economies come together and meet every year. This is the first time that the leaders failed to achieve consensus in coming up with a statement. Now, that's the significant part of it, because it's the first instance. But it doesn't necessarily put a dampener to all the efforts that have been undertaken this year in APEC. This has been a very crucial year for APEC as well. And of course, this is also a banner year for the host, Papua New Guinea. It was their first time to host the APEC meetings since joining APEC in the early 90s. So while there was no consensus at the statement, it was also an opportunity for the chair, who is the host economy, to now come up with a statement which he believes reflects the outcome of the APEC meetings this year.
So that's a prerogative of a chair?
Yes.
When there is no consensus reached, the chair can issue a statement
it will issue
that reflects the overall consensus.
That's right.
Okay.
The overall sentiment and citing the work that has been done over the year.
So what's the effect of this in the world economy?
Well, the lack of a consensus actually boiled down to there was a draft declaration that was being worked on even up to the very last minute of the leaders' retreat in APEC, in Port Moresby. So I believe, like for instance, for the Philippines, we were really very much intent on coming up with a consensus declaration in support of what we had set out to do for this year. Now, in the course of coming up with a declaration, of course, all the parties had to come together and negotiate the final wording. And the key here is the wording. Because it all boiled down to a few
that's where the tension is.
Yes.
A few words and punctuation marks, actually. I was part of APEC 2015, and I saw the process.
It can happen, yes. So in this case, it all boiled down to some key differences, and it concerned matters pertaining to the multilateral trading system, the digital economy, and the reform agenda in the free trade area of the Asia Pacific. It really boiled down to just the wordings concerning these items, and it showed during the negotiations the differing views, especially of the two biggest economies of APEC.
China and the United States. Okay. Yes. Both leaders of those. Oh no, Donald Trump was there.
The vice president
Pence was there, and Xi Jinping was there.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So does this have any actual effect on how the world economy operates?
Well, even as we speak, I believe the tensions between the two would start to subside, even especially after they have, in recent years, they have come to an arrangement wherein they will, at the very least, come to a working arrangement where they don't necessarily have to proceed with certain tariffs and all that. So, as far as the impact, I believe with this latest development, we will see tensions subsiding somewhat.
Let's be straight about this. Does the APEC agreements have? Do they have any? I mean, binding. Is it binding to the countries concerned, unlike WTO?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. The APEC itself is a non-binding regional cooperation platform. In fact, it is one of the more developed and most important regional cooperation platforms for the Philippines. And the key word here is non-binding.
Okay. So it doesn't really have any effect.
It doesn't have the legal effect of
a WTO.
Of a WTO.
Okay.
And we do everything by consensus, and everything that we agree upon, it will be among like-minded parties.
Okay.
And we come into an initiative with that in mind.
So how will this proceed now, do you think?
Well, we continue on with the work in APEC. Especially, we will in the next couple of days, the hosting of the next APEC for the following year. The host is Chile.
Chile, okay.
So we will be having the informal senior officials meeting.
Okay.
This will start the hosting year of Chile, and we will now examine the outcome of
the effects of the
APEC.
Of the no resolution for no joint statement for 2018.
We will look at that certainly, and we will in fact see where we can probably examine different approaches on how we can pursue our agenda in APEC.
Okay, you were there in Papua New Guinea. How palpable was the tension between the two major powers, two major economic powers?
Well, suffice it to say that each side gave a very spirited rationale for taking the positions that they did. The same as the Philippines. We also gave our inputs into the process because we are also after our own advocacies in APEC. When the President was there, he was also articulating our inclusive globalization agenda and the importance of preparing the Philippines for a digital economy.
Okay.
And of course also facilitating the market access of micro, small, and medium enterprises.
Which we actually started when we hosted APEC way back in 2015.
This is when we hosted APEC in 2015. What came out of that were several key initiatives, foremost of which is the Boracay Action Agenda, which is devoted to enabling Philippine MSMEs to be able to tap the market abroad and be able to sell their products and services abroad.
Okay, 2018 was the first time that Papua New Guinea hosted an event as big as APEC. So how was Papua New Guinea as a host?
Well, the Philippines offhand has been fully supportive of Papua New Guinea's effort at hosting APEC. In fact, when we hosted APEC back in 2015, we had already invited them to come and see how it is to prepare for.
And I think there were some meetings that were held in Papua New, at least one meeting, I suppose.
And obviously, there are always challenges when you're hosting a big event like this. This is a big showcase for the country, and this is and Papua New Guinea is also very significant for the Philippines because there are over almost 40,000 Filipinos living in Papua New Guinea.
What are the Filipinos doing in Papua New Guinea?
Well, they're very successful. Most of them are in the services industry, and a lot of them are also supervisors, managers in different fields. And there are over 200 companies operating, Philippine companies operating in Port Moresby.
Okay.
So the president also had an opportunity to meet and greet the Filipino community in Port Moresby as well.
So how was President Duterte in Papua New Guinea, in APEC 2018? How was he there?
Yes, well, the president, again, he fulfilled his commitment to be part of the APEC process, and also fulfilled his commitment to the host Papua New Guinea, to support the Papua New Guinea hosting.
Okay.
And it was very successful. The president articulated our positions, and he promoted the achievements of the administration in terms of the reform agenda, inclusive growth, and also infrastructure development.
Okay. Okay. So all in all, in spite of what happened, the tension between China and the U.S., you could say that APEC 2018 was still a very successful event.
Because, like I said, you could see merit in the views of both sides.
Okay.
But for us, we also we look at this in terms of our own interests and our own advocacies as well. Okay. So much as it just gives us a realization that we need to continue on, and we look forward to the work that needs to be done in the coming year as well, in continuation of the work that has been done in Port Moresby.
Okay, thank you very much, Eric. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you in one of our future episodes.
Health is our When visiting the Philippines, Manila or Quezon City is a popular destination. But oftentimes the hustle and bustle of the city can be more stressful on your vacation. So when you feel the need to reconnect to nature or relax again, there's a beautiful oasis just outside of the city called the Garden at Ciudad de Victoria. Some of the species that you can see here include hydrangea, snapdragon, and stargazers. They're truly beautiful. The gardens at Ciudad de Victoria are so peaceful, tranquil, and beautiful that it's become a haven for young couples and a very popular venue for engagement photos. The next time you want an escape from the big city, the garden at Ciudad de Victoria is a wonderful place to visit.
Okay, we're back with our interview with Mr. Eric Tamayo here, the Director General of the APEC Philippines National Secretariat. Okay, earlier we were talking about what happened in APEC 2018 that was held in Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. So, apart from the fact that for the first time in the history of leaders' meetings in APEC, there was no joint statement issued, and you said earlier that it was the chair country, PNG, that issued the chairman's statement.
Yes.
But apart from that, what were the significant achievements of these 2018 meetings? Yes,
thank you very much. So if you look closely, the statement coming from the host economy reflects the work that has been done for the year. And most notably here, one of the major initiatives that transpired in 2018 was the convening of the what we call the APEC Post-2020 Vision Group.
Okay, APEC Post-2020 Vision Group. What's this?
This is a special panel, a special group of experts. Each economy nominated an expert to be part of this group, and this group has been mandated to come up with a new vision of APEC beyond 2020. Now, the reason post-2020 is that the original APEC vision was encapsulated in what we call the Bogor Goals.
It was held 1994?
In 94.
In Bogor, Indonesia.
Yes.
Okay.
So it essentially articulated the vision of APEC, which is free and open trade and investment in the Asia-Pacific region. And not only that, but to achieve all this by the year 2020.
Okay.
So
also there was a timeline for
there's a
Bogor,
timeline, yes.
2020.
Yes.
Okay, so now you formed this post-2020 vision committee to craft another vision. So are there any...
during the hosting of Vietnam in 2017, the leaders adopted the declaration and endorsed the work of this experts group.
So it started actually
yes, but the work
ago.
Started in earnest in Port Moresby. So
okay.
in Port Moresby, we nominated experts, and the experts started and began their work in determining a new vision. So with 2020 just around the corner, it is hoped that with the timetable that they're working on, this expert group will come up with a new APEC vision to be endorsed to the senior officials of APEC and to be announced by the leaders come year 2020.
Has there begun any discussion on what will be in the 2020 vision, post-2020 vision?
Yes, in fact, there have been robust discussions that had taken place. Papua New Guinea hosted a seminar and a workshop for the group. These are all very eminent, very well-known persons from each economy, and they tackle issues ranging from issues like, let's say, the fourth industrial revolution, the third unbundling of globalization, and of course, you cannot avoid the multilateral trading system, as well as we are pragmatic enough to say that our attainment of the Bogor goals is a bit mixed. So we expect that the new vision will continue on the work of the Bogor goals in the near future.
When you say Bogor goals, a record for Bogor goals is a bit mixed, what do you mean by this?
Well, the Bogor goals would have resulted by 2020 among APEC economies that all barriers to trade and investment would have gone down.
So they haven't gone down yet.
There are areas where we've had tremendous success, and there are areas we think a lot of work still needs to be done, and we know that. And there has been a study undertaken by the Policy Support Unit in APEC.
This one is based in Singapore.
In Singapore, right? Yes. So they're doing periodic studies. In fact, they publish their latest findings on how far APEC has come in attaining the Bogor goals.
So, what are the success areas? Can you name some?
Well, some of them certainly would involve the reduction in tariff lines across a wide range of products. But of course, in some aspects, like in some sectors, like maybe in agriculture, there are some sticky issues that still need to be done.
So especially in agriculture.
So it's really in terms of trade in goods, tariff lines have generally come down, but there are still issues that involve non-tariff matters. So these are some areas where trade is being hindered by the presence of these non-tariff measures.
For the sake of those who are not really familiar with how APEC works, what's the difference between APEC and the World Trade Organization? Which comes first? Which came first?
Well, APEC as a platform started in 1989. Now, if you really count the time when the World Trade Organization came into being, it was in 1994. But the World Trade Organization had the work towards the World Trade Organization already begun with the Doha development agenda, and it was just a matter of transforming, well, loosely speaking, it into this World Trade Organization. And in fact, much of the premises contained in the original Bogor goals was in response to the coming into being of the World Trade Organization at that time.
WTO, actually, APEC came first 1989, and then WTO...
WTO as a full-fledged organization came in 1994. So, and the difference between the two is APEC is a non-binding platform. It's a platform for member economies composed of 21 economies in the Asia-Pacific region to be discussing trade and investment issues, structural reform, whereas the World Trade Organization is a binding treaty-based platform, and there are certainly it covers most of the economies around the globe.
When you say binding, the WTO can issue sanctions for erring states, for erring members.
If there's a determination of violation, let's say, then there can be sanctions that can be prescribed by the WTO, and the aggrieved party can In fact, based on the finding of the WTO, can institute measures that will seek to compensate for any injury.
Unlike APEC, this is not binding.
APEC covers a whole range of activities in the economy, not just trading goods, trading service, but also various aspects of the conduct of trade, which involves human resource development, gender empowerment, and sectoral dialogues.
So it's more comprehensive. APEC coverage is more comprehensive. Can you say that? It covers environment, among others.
In terms of building capacities of member economies and facilitating the exchanges among member economies, APEC has its own program and agenda in pursuing and promoting regional cooperation among the member economies.
So since 1989, were you already there in DFA during that time?
No.
Oh, okay. But can you, how do you assess the performance of APEC since 1989? How much has this contributed to really promoting its agenda?
Well, you have to look at hard data and statistics when it comes to assessing really the impact of a forum like APEC. But I believe that statistics can prove that that correlates the impact of APEC as a forum with tremendous and dramatic economic growth and development of member economies. Case in point would be when it comes to the Philippines. Our GDP levels at that time are quite have improved dramatically over the years. And while we won't say that it's because of APEC, but certainly you can draw some correlations by the opportunities presented by our engagement in APEC. In the same way, like other economies like China can also draw correlations with their membership in APEC and the opportunities presented here in the forum for the dramatic economic growth that we have seen as well over the last 20 years.
Okay, we will talk more about the different issues concerning APEC, and this time we will correlate APEC with ASEAN and the Philippines when ASEAN in Focus Weekend Edition returns.
Health is our most important asset, and it should
Welcome back to ASEAN in Focus Weekend Edition. We're still here with Mr. Eric Tamayo, the Director General of the APEC Philippines National Secretariat. Eric, when we hosted APEC way back in 2015, our theme was building inclusive economies, building a better world, and we had lined up several priorities. How was it in 2018?
Well, if you will see, beginning our hosting in 2015 up to then following on to Peru, and then Vietnam, and then Papua New Guinea, it shows more or less a common thread. But for Papua New Guinea, their theme focused on harnessing inclusive opportunities, embracing the digital future.
Okay, so there was emphasis on the digital future. Okay,
yes.
so what are their themes now? What are their priorities now?
Well, it includes improving connectivity,
Okay.
first and foremost, deepening regional economic integration, and promoting sustainable and inclusive growth, and strengthening inclusive growth through structural reform.
Okay, I remember when we hosted APEC in 2015, our focus was on assisting the MSMEs, micro, small, and medium industries. Was this carried to in Papua New Guinea?
Yes, certainly, and the MSMEs, as we call them,
yes,
in APEC, continues to be at the forefront of the advocacies of not only the senior officials and the ministers and the leaders, but also among our partners, which is the APEC Business Advisory Council.
Okay.
They, the MISMIs and the people are front and center of what APEC is all about. And this year, one of the more notable developments is that a stock take was undertaken on the Boracay Action Agenda by the Department of Trade and Industry.
That was actually one of our major contributions to the APEC process, the Boracay Action Agenda. What's the Boracay Action Agenda?
Now, in a nutshell, this is an initiative that focuses on MISMIs to be able to facilitate their access to global markets as a whole, and enhancing their regional access to the regional markets.
So this was carried over in Papua New Guinea.
There was a stock take, and there was a we received feedback from the economies on how it's going and our plans for.
And then the digital economy. What happened in the discussions?
And this is very important for us because the digital economy is perhaps one of the more, shall we say, disruptive of developments that we've seen, and this is in connection with what experts are looking at as the fourth industrial revolution.
Okay.
So everything that we do, that the economy is being driven by online activities, and the skills and jobs necessary for the economy are in one way related to skills that has something to do with digital know-how, operating in a digital environment, and this is to some extent we are seeing we have benefited from this digital economy. A lot of our call centers, for instance, the services that they provide are being facilitated by advances in technology and innovations in communication.
Okay, what was the consensus on how the digital divide among the member countries? You have the tremendously advanced economies in terms of digitalization, and you have some backward countries. So what was the consensus in bridging this divide?
Yes, that's correct. It's pretty much uneven, the state of the preparedness of each economy, especially among APEC. And that is what was acknowledged as well by the President when he said there are really challenges for us because of this. As digital economy progresses, we foresee some displacement, and we foresee that we need to retool and arm our young people, especially, with the know-how and the skills to be able to function in a digital economy. So one of the key highlights of the Papua New Guinea APEC hosting is that all the economies agreed to implement what we call the APEC Internet and Digital Economy Roadmap.
Okay.
So this is a roadmap, and each country will now come up with their respective plans. And to align it with one another and to harmonize it. And that is in part one way for those economies that are a bit challenged in the digital economy aspect to be able to look at the good practices of other more advanced economies and see how they can respond to the challenge of this type of this new development.
Okay, one of our priorities then when we hosted, I'm always going back to 2015 because I'm familiar with the process that happened. Yeah. One of our priorities then was building sustainable and resilient communities, and we see from 2015 to 2018, there's this pattern of climate change, global warming. So how was this addressed in APEC 2018?
The issue of climate change remained one of the big topics in APEC. And in fact, there have been some major discussions that involve disaster preparedness and resiliency. And even during the one of the meetings, we highlighted the fact that the Philippines has come a long way in preparing itself for calamities, especially borne by the multiple typhoons that we encounter year in, year out. And a case in point would be the recent typhoons that hit the northern Luzon area. Almost twice in a row, we had very big typhoons coming in. There are still casualties, unfortunately, but not to the extent, the scale that we've seen when we marked the anniversary of Haiyan last November. And based on the statistics there, you could see that we have come a long way in taking to heart the lessons learned during that episode. And this is something that we shared with our colleagues in APEC as well.
Okay, APEC is a year-long series of meetings and events. And it ends with the APEC Economic Leaders meetings held every November. Okay, so, but this is after that the hosting will pass on to the next to the next host. So, what happens? So we're now in December. So what happens now?
Okay, well, as by tradition, the hosting of APEC rotates among member economies.
Is this alphabetical or?
It's alphabetical.
Okay.
But because well, some countries have passed over the chance of,
because it's a very costly
some countries wanted to, so we more or less follow an alphabetical protocol. So in this case, and the APEC has a full calendar of activities each year. And there are mandatory meetings, what we call mandatory meetings.
What are the mandatory meetings?
So mostly these are the meetings attended by the senior officials of APEC. Each economy has a designated senior official. So each year there are about 4 what we call senior official meetings taking place every year. And it starts off with the informal SOM, informal senior officials meeting.
Which happens, I think, December?
This happens December, right after the hosting of the previous economy.
Okay.
So, in fact, the next host after Papua New Guinea is Chile. And they're having the ISOM, what we call the ISOM, in the this week.
Okay.
So after the ISOM, we have what we call the first senior officials meeting.
The first quarter.
The first quarter, which happens the first quarter of the year, and then this is about the SOM meetings is a culmination of the meetings of other smaller groups
on the ministerial
within APEC. So there are working groups, there are task friends of the chair groups meeting. And then it culminates with the senior officials meeting. And then there's a second officials meeting that happens in the second quarter of the year. And it's also that way. There's a series of meetings undertaken by the smaller groups.
Okay. These are actually continuing meetings.
These are continuing meetings.
So they're the agendas developed through the months. Okay.
And then there's a third senior officials meeting that happens around the third quarter of the year, and this is all in preparation. We're finalizing now all the agenda in preparation for the the fourth meeting in what we call the APEC Economic Leaders Week,
Okay.
which is in the fourth quarter, and it usually happens in November. The APEC Economic Leaders Week is comprised of the fourth and final meeting of the senior officials, the meeting of the joint meeting of the foreign ministers and the trade ministers, and the leaders retreat. So this is the culmination of all the meetings that happened in APEC. Now, also in between and after each SOM, we also have meetings by the trade ministers, by the finance ministers,
transportation ministers,
and other sectoral
so it's a
ministers.
whole series of
you have
meetings.
tourism, you have mining.
Yes,
You have
energy ministers,
yeah.
health ministers.
So now this more or less depends on the host economy, the priorities, but it usually takes place as well in the lead up to the final event, which is the APEC Economic Leaders Week.
And you're there in all of these meetings.
As the secretariat.
That's part of your job.
Yes.
So it takes yearly the whole year for you to attend all of these meetings.
Yes, because part of our work is to be the secretariat for the technical board on APEC matters. This is an interagency group, all working towards maximizing our participation in APEC, articulating our interests, and also articulating our advocacies. So there are, I think, now almost 60 agencies who are members of this technical board. So imagine all of them participating. They have scheduled meetings across the year, and so we facilitate their participation throughout the year.
Okay, before we end this segment, we just want to reiterate that APEC, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation is a grouping of economies, not of countries.
Not of countries.
That's why the main summit, you call it the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting, because these are the leaders of the different economies. When you say that, so you don't have countries as members, but you have economies as members. That's why we have Hong Kong as a separate member, and
you have Chinese Taipei
as a separate member also. Okay, so we for China, they have 3 representations actually: China, ROC, Hong Kong, and Chinese Taipei. Okay, we will talk more about the different issues surrounding APEC, specifically APEC and ASEAN, when ASEAN in Focus Weekend Edition returns. Okay, we're back with our last block of interview with the Director General Eric Tamayo of the APEC Philippines National Secretariat. But before we proceed, we would like to make some clarifications. The members of APEC are economies, and they are considered as customs territories. And because of that, China is a different. People's Republic of China is treated as a different economy. Hong Kong is treated as a different economy. And Taiwan is also treated. Chinese Taipei is also treated as a separate economy in APEC. Yeah. Okay, APEC and ASEAN. What's the difference between APEC and ASEAN?
Well, to look into that, certainly our engagement in ASEAN goes a way back, and you have to look at it in the context of the environment by which they were created. And ASEAN is essentially comprised of the 10 countries in the Southeast Asian region, while in APEC it is a platform for 21 economies with
economies as distinct from countries.
From countries, okay. Yes. So, and not all of the ASEAN members are members of APEC.
Okay, I think there are 7 ASEAN members.
There are 7 ASEAN economies or members of APEC.
These are the non-members are those in mainland ASEAN that do not border the Pacific Ocean.
Well, as long as you're in Asia, then it technically can
be a member.
The argument can be made to be part. But for now, economies like Laos and Cambodia and Myanmar, are not members of APEC. And right now, APEC has for a time, APEC had a moratorium on new members. But the moratorium lapsed in 2010 or 2011.
Which means some economies are applying for
economies. We can manifest an interest to join APEC.
Well, what about India? One of the major economies in Asia.
I believe earlier they had expressed interest, but I'm not. I'll need to check on the status of the interest for this year. But historically, they've expressed interest, and the issue of new membership, while the moratorium had already lapsed, it remains a somewhat delicate matter for APEC economies. So. I imagine that perhaps additional discussions will need to take place for APEC to tackle the issue of new membership in the forum. But going back to the question of the key differences. Now, ASEAN is the Philippines' trade agenda is. Can be classified into several lateral levels. What we call the multilateral, the regional, and the bilateral. And ASEAN, as a regional engagement, is certainly the most developed platform for the Philippines, because it is an engagement that we have that just recently ASEAN has transformed itself into an ASEAN economic market, economic community, which is an advanced stage on closer integration. And it's certainly something that has a very robust engagement cutting across different sectors, whether political, economic, socio-cultural activities among ASEAN members. So that's one key difference. A lot of this is also binding on the part of, although we both operate under consensus, but certain phases of our integration binds and links ASEAN members to each other. So there's a reason why it's now the practice of among ASEAN countries to fly not only their national flag, but the ASEAN flag as well, to demonstrate how close
yes.
and how intertwined our interests are.
We don't
with
use
one
APEC
another.
flags normally. We use ASEAN flags. Okay. I only see the APEC flags when there's APEC meetings.
We're careful not to include the flags.
Yes, in
APEC.
Yeah, I remember there was one incident way back in 20. I won't talk about that. Okay, so continue on.
Yeah. So ASEAN is certainly the trajectory of ASEAN is of course closer economic integration among the members, and also to leverage the strength among 10 countries to be able to engage its dialogue partners.
Yes.
So you have now 6 dialogue partners, and these 6 dialogue partners now form this umbrella grouping where we can now engage them in a wider economic activity, such as the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership,
Yes.
the RCEP.
RCEP.
And RCEP the discussions are ongoing, and this is an initiative where we would have ASEAN at the core of RCEP.
Yes.
So this is basically ASEAN and all its 6 dialogue partners coming together. Now, APEC has its own version of economic integration. This is what we call the Free Trade Area of Asia and the Pacific. It used to be seen as an adjunct of APEC, but it was articulated during the hosting by China. More so, and over the years, there are still ongoing efforts to bring together all many of these economies together under a binding legal platform of economic partnership.
And of course, we know for a fact that ASEAN goes beyond the economic community.
Yes.
We also have the political security community, which actually how ASEAN started. It's supposed to be a political security platform to address political issues, security issues within the region.
Yes, some historians will view the formation of ASEAN as a reaction to what was then the prevailing situation in the late 60s and the 70s during the Cold War, and mitigating the tendency to be seen as, let's say, pawns of one or the other side. So that may be the backdrop of ASEAN. For APEC, it's really more in reaction to what transpired after the end of the Cold War and the rise of the European Union. And also and eventually the formation of the World Trade Organization. In that time period.
And for ASEAN, there's also another pillar, the socio-cultural pillar, which involves the finding the ASEAN identity. APEC has not gone to that, finding the APEC identity.
Well, APEC has been successful in what it has been over the years. It has been at the forefront of innovation.
Yes.
It has been an incubator of ideas. So economies can test an idea, and economies can react to it and see if it works. And if some economies can group together, they'll form a Pathfinder initiative. They'll work on that.
Yes.
So we've seen that happen over the years, and the work of APEC is closely aligned with what we see as the continuing work in the WTO.
Okay.
So we would like to promote that rules-based regime in our part of the world, and we see it as complementing the work of the World Trade Organization. And in fact, APEC provides a platform by which economies can discuss very controversial issues without fear of having any
without any fear of any retribution from
tensions.
Okay, APEC and Philippines, how are we within APEC?
Yes.
Our contributions to APEC.
Yes. Well, you can look at it in the way by which the profile of Philippine trade with APEC is. About 84% of our trade abroad, or globally, is with APEC member economies.
83% of our trade is within APEC.
Yes.
Okay.
84% of our exports go to APEC
To
economies.
APEC economies.
85% of our imports come from APEC. 83% of tourism arrivals come from APEC economies.
We have to remember China is part of APEC, so that explains.
So APEC is really, and if you look at it, APEC itself as a regional organization, 60% of global GDP is generated by APEC member economies, and 49% of the world's population is found in the APEC region. So that's how compelling APEC is as a region, and that's how significant APEC is to the Philippines, even though our engagement with them is mostly on a non-binding basis.
So, all in all, how do you assess our membership in APEC for the last? We were there when the APEC started, 1989. 89. So how have you been so far?
Well, it's certainly APEC. It can be easily demonstrated how important APEC is to the Philippines. We have benefited from the various capacity building, economic and technical cooperation projects.
The key here is capacity building and economic cooperation. Okay.
Yeah, and this has tremendously benefited many of our agencies here within the government. It has benefited marginalized sectors like the women, differently abled persons. So it's over the years, APEC has demonstrated that and has translated into
benefits for
the Philippines and for the people.
And we aim to continue that in the next.
We hope to continue it, and we hope to now with the new vision exercise underway. We hope to contribute and to be able to articulate what we think will be the priorities of APEC in the next few years, and it's always aligned with our aspirations as a country, as contained in the Philippine Development Agenda, Ambition 2040, the President's 0+10 agenda, and also our commitments with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals.
Okay, so the Philippines is bound to stay in APEC, and APEC will always help the Philippines. The key here is capacity building and economic transactions.